So at this point, you have no doubt seen plenty of videos and plenty of YouTubers and plenty of articles discussing all of this information that just came out about Nintendo's sales, which they do quarterly. They update the world about what's going on with Nintendo, how successful is their hardware, how many units are they selling of software, what does their whole financial picture look like. That's what they've done, and I know, again, you've probably seen the numbers we're going to discuss several times, you've heard other people talk about it, but I, of course, still am interested in this. I find it fascinating. Nintendo is my favorite company in gaming, as you obviously know. So yeah, I have thoughts on it. I want to discuss it for myself and kind of hear what you guys have to say about it as well. So obviously, the long and the short of it is that Nintendo is killing it, you guys. They are doing so amazingly well right now, which we obviously knew to expect even before this year started and the pandemic hit. We know that Nintendo is doing extremely well. All of their previous updates about their sales had shown how successful the Nintendo Switch and their first-party software has been. But then, of course, we move into 2020 and the pandemic hits, and the already unstoppable Switch has really just become even more unstoppable. This boulder rolling down this hill just became a bigger boulder, basically, and no one can seem to get out of the path of destruction that the Switch is leaving in its wake. In a good way, of course. It's a good destruction. It's not a bad destruction. I think you guys know what I mean. So obviously one of the biggest updates we got was how many Nintendo Switches have been sold life to date worldwide, and it is 61.44 million units of Nintendo Switches, you guys. That is crazy. It finally surpassed the Super Nintendo since the last update we got, which I think was around 44 million or so, if I'm remembering right. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but the Super Nintendo, obviously you see it 49 million units. The Nintendo Switch passed it by a lot. And right now, it's knocking on the door of the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System, which I have to say, it is always quite shocking to me to see how many more NESs sold compared to SNESs, mostly because the gaming industry was so much smaller at the time that the NES was out. You could argue there was also less competition for most of the NES's life, and that is very true. The Sega Master System was great, but it didn't really put up a fight. Only in the 16-bit era with the SNES did the Genesis come along and take a huge bite out of Nintendo's dominance, and it was this great two-headed battle. For so long, my favorite era, my favorite generation of gaming, I have wonderful memories of the excitement of the 16-bit era. But when we look at the NES and Super NES, it's just is very shocking to me that, you know, so many more millions of units of NESs were sold compared to the SNES, which I also think is a much better console. Like, I love the NES, I grew up on the NES, but the Super Nintendo is better. Anyway, we're not talking about that stuff, we're talking about the Switch. Within a matter of probably weeks, it's going to surpass the 61.91 million units of the NES to become Nintendo's second best home console of all time. Now, of course, we can also see the software sales, 406.67 million units of software sold on the Switch already. And the big thing about these numbers, you know, 61.4 million Switches, 406.6 million units of software sold, that is 3.5 years of life. That is massive, you guys. It is so crazy and so impressive. And while there are some things about the current era of Nintendo and even the Switch itself that I maybe wish were being handled differently or better in some arenas, overall, big picture stuff, this is great. I'm incredibly happy for Nintendo, my favorite company. I think that when they're putting their all into their hardware and they're putting their all into their software, they are far and away, far and above the best gaming company in the industry. And just in terms of quality and in terms of stuff that speaks to me personally. Obviously a little bit biased, having grown up in the 80s and 90s as a Nintendo fan as well, but I still think objectively you can look at what they do, again, when they're putting their all into it, and it's incredible. So it is really awesome to see how well Nintendo is doing and how well people are kind of embracing the Nintendo Switch and what the system offers and even some of its best games. Which, of course, we also got an update on some of their biggest game sales, and there are some pretty big numbers to go through here as well. Not a lot of surprises, but it's great to see where things stand. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, no shocker, the biggest seller on the console, 26.74 million units, and when you add the 8 or so million from the Wii U, that game is just a monster. And you can argue that maybe this game doing so well on the Switch did some damage in the sense that Nintendo is now relying too heavily on deluxe Wii U ports, and I think that there's a good debate to be had there. But at the end of the day, Mario Kart 8 is still an amazing game. It's worth these sales. And it's crazy to see that that's how popular this franchise is. 26 million units on the Switch alone. Animal Crossing New Horizons is, of course, the other huge deal. The game has been out for literal months, you guys. Months since this game came out. What, 5 months? 22.4 million units. What in the holy hell? That is crazy. And of course, it's extra crazy for me as somebody who is a Nintendo fan but not an Animal Crossing fan. But, you know, the power of this franchise cannot be undersold. Obviously, the pandemic helped, but that doesn't mean this game wouldn't have still been a massive juggernaut, even without the pandemic sales. I truly believe that. Smash Bros. Ultimate, 19.99, basically 20 million units. That is amazing. The game is incredible, well-deserved. Breath of the Wild, in my opinion, the best game on the Switch, hands down. 18.6 million units. You love to see it. Pokemon Sword and Shield, all the Pokemon fans out there, which is not me, for all the hating and crying everyone did, y'all bought this game, 18.2 million units. So as a non-Pokemon fan from the outside looking in, Pokemon the franchise and Pokemon the fandom continues to baffle me. I do not understand you guys. And I am not making a criticism of the Pokemon games. Like, I have nothing against Pokemon. Doesn't appeal to me, not fun for me, but they're fine, and I'm glad that so many people love them, but I don't understand it. I don't understand Pokemon. I don't understand you guys. You all just confound me, and it's frustrating and also kind of hilarious. I don't know. 18 million units. Congrats to Pokemon. Clearly, you guys like that game. Super Mario Odyssey, 18.06. Great game. Love to see it. Not the best Mario game. There are some issues, but I'm glad to see it. And then even the Let's Go Pokemon games sold 12 million units. Mario Party at 10.94. That's crazy to me. I heard that game wasn't that good, but apparently 10 million units. Splatoon 2 at 10 million units. An amazing game. I wish it was higher, but still very successful. And then New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe at 7 million units. There's another Wii U port selling like crazy on the Switch. And probably the most staggering number in all of this. Everything about Nintendo in 2020 during a pandemic quarantine. Here's the most staggering number to me. According to CNBC and this article here, they say that they have reported a 428% increase in profits during the quarantine in 2020. You guys, that's not a 428% increase in sales. That is profit. 428% profit increase on top of the profit they already would have been making. Wow. You guys, that number is staggering. Like, it could almost knock you over with how powerful that number is. And obviously a lot of gaming companies and a lot of games and consoles have done well. Sony has done amazingly well. The Last of Us Part 2, which is a great game, broke records for Sony exclusives. Like, other game companies are doing well. I've discussed it before, and I'm happy for everybody. But focusing on Nintendo's new information here in this video, 428%, you guys. That is, and it's profit. That is extra money in Nintendo's pocket. That's because the Nintendo Switch is their hardware, so they net 100% of the profits. And all of those games that I just read off to you in their insane sales, they're all first party, with the exception of the Pokemon stuff where they do split that revenue. But everything else that's first party, your Smash Brothers and your Marios and your Zeldas and your Mario Karts, they are taking all of that profit in. Every profit made from every game sale is 100% Nintendo's. And for digital sales, that becomes 100% of the sale becomes Nintendo's. So the retail stuff, they're splitting it at least with them, but the profits become theirs. But on the digital stuff, there is no splitting of anything. So that's 100% of the sale is profit. It's mind-blowing. And so I come back to what I said earlier. It's crazy to see Nintendo this successful. It is completely wild after the failure that was the Wii U. As great as the Wii U was as a machine, the sales were a complete failure. And what an incredible turnaround they've done so far. And so, for all this yelling and hooting and hollering that I'm doing about all these crazy sales and just yammering out these numbers to you guys about hardware and games and whatever, where does this leave us, and what do I think about all of this? I mean, obviously it shows that Nintendo can rebound like nobody else can. It shows that people love and they embrace the Switch, and I think the Switch is great. It is not in my probably top 5 Nintendo consoles. Well, maybe it's like right at number 5 or so. I don't know. I'd have to rank them. Point is, it is a console with a library that I both love, but also have some questions about, and there are some things about prior Nintendo generations that I like much, much better than what the Switch is doing. But at the end of the day, it is a great machine. I love it. I play it a lot. It's been hard to watch Nintendo not have a lot to release this year. That has been very difficult. Paper Mario's been and Xenoblade. Paper Mario and Xenoblade have been the only games I've purchased this year. Xenoblade is a game I already own and I already played back in 2012, so I really just bought it again just to enjoy it. And then Paper Mario is a franchise I don't really care about, and it's not an amazing game, but it is very fun. I am enjoying it. It's better than the controversy has said, and I think it's a good game. Everything else they've done and everything else they're doing, not terribly exciting to me, and I think that the lack of Nintendo Directs and information, release dates for games that we know about, like Breath of the Wild, Bayonetta 3, No More Heroes, all of these things. There are issues with Nintendo in 2020, as I've spent the majority of the year talking about to you guys. But what does it all mean if Nintendo is selling 61 million Switches and raking in a 428% profit increase? It means that Nintendo is sitting nice and pretty. They've pocketed all of that extra money, like I said, and it's going to probably only help fund them for future years and future generations. And at the end of the day, I think 2020 will be a year that we look back on and say, this is the year Nintendo padded their pockets more than ever before to help support the creation of all these great new games we might play over the next couple of years. And whatever their next hardware turns out to be, most of that is probably going to be funded from funds that they made in 2020. Now, is there a downside to any of this? I struggle to use the word downside to describe it, but I will say I think that there is another angle or perspective to view all of this success from, and that would be that in a year where Nintendo has been more silent than they need to be, granted, some slack is earned to them because of the pandemic, just like other companies in the industry as well. So partly it's not their fault, but outside of that, once we become far enough removed from the pandemic, you start to realize that Nintendo maybe has been a little bit too comfortable not being transparent with their messaging, not talking to us about what they're releasing, giving us release dates, showing us new games, handing out Nintendo Directs, doing the normal thing that they normally do, or just being transparent about why they're not doing it. You could argue that them being able to do that, but still being so massively successful because of an extenuating circumstance pandemic, does maybe create a little bit of an issue, because Nintendo maybe learned a lesson that, hey, we don't have to release games, talk about games, give release dates, show Nintendo Directs, and people are still going to gobble up the little bit of product that we're drip feeding out to them. And so maybe Nintendo, you could argue, could be, emphasis on the word could, we don't know this, could be learning a not great lesson from this. Hey, we don't have to really satisfy people's desires in order to make a lot of money or even break records and make crazy profit. And to that, I would say that would be unfortunate. If Nintendo would be looking at it that way, if Nintendo internally is learning this lesson that the less we do, the more money we can make, you could say that that's a problem. Yeah, I would say that that could be perceived as a downside from all of this success. But what I will say is I really don't want to believe that Nintendo would be learning that lesson from this situation. Yes, Nintendo is a business and they care about their money first and foremost, above any of us, for sure. But I think that they're also a company that does care about their brand, and I think that they also do care about their fans and their community to enough of a degree that they wouldn't want to say, oh, we don't have to do anything in the future in order to make money and to make profits and to make revenue. That doesn't feel like the Nintendo that I think most of us know. And they're a smart enough company to know that a different kind of damage could be done if they were to continue to ride out 2020's business philosophy. They can't ignore how weird this year has been. They can't ignore the fact that they made so many crazy sales because of a different situation. And they obviously can't ignore the fact that the fans are aware of how slow things have been this year. So the fans are going to be calling them out if into the years 2021, 22, 23, 24, 25, all those years, if they continue to do this. It's just not going to work out in their favor. I mean, you can call me naive if you want, but I really think that the future is going to be strong and bright for Nintendo because of the sales of 2020. Like I said, I think that 2020 is going to be a huge bastion of hope for future Nintendo years and for their next console because of all this crazy money. So is there a potential downside or a negative perspective to view all of this success in 2020 from? Yeah, there is. I discussed it. Absolutely, it's there. But I don't think it's going to do any real harm. It's clearly just good. It's a good company doing good things and getting rewarded properly with great sales, you know? And so, even though it's been so frustrating for a lot of us this year, with so little information, so little communication, and not a whole lot of the games and release dates that we've been looking for, at the end of the day, there is reason to understand it, and I do still think Nintendo is a good company who deserves this success. So that's how I see things, man. These are my thoughts and opinions. It's a very unique situation. Happy to see the success. You know, what do you guys think? I want to hear what you have to say about my personal breakdown and your own thoughts and opinions. And do you see this as an exclusively good thing? Do you understand the weird kind of negative potential perspective that I discussed? How do you feel about all these numbers and all these sales that Nintendo is seeing in 2020, a year that they've been very quiet? What do you think about it? And so with that, this video is a wrap. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule of Two Review, and I will catch you next time on another video.